By the time the towers of Harrenhal rose from the morning haze, they seemed less like towers than the stubs of burned candles, melted and hardened, black against the pewter mirror of the lake. The reeds along the shore chattered under a wind that tasted of old ash. Catelyn Stark's palfrey tossed her head, fretful at the smell, and gray wind paced ahead, the great direwolf turning now and again to look back at the boy king who rode behind his mother. Boy, Catelyn thought, and then she looked again and could not pretend. Robb rode straight as a spear, mail glinting, fur over his shoulders, the crown of bronze and iron leaf nestled in his russet hair. Songmakers had already given him a dozen names. Today he was only a son she had carried through winters and summers to this place that had swallowed queens and lords and all their bright ambitions. At the causeway their columns slowed. The standard-bearers checked their mounts. The direwolf rippled and moved aside as a half-score of men with long white staffs stepped forward from beneath a banner sewn with the seven-pointed star. The seven-pointed star streamed in white upon blue, the cloth new and stiff. A septon in plain gray wool stood between them, his hair razored close to the scalp, face wind-chapped, eyes very steady. "King Robb of Winter," he called, voice carrying over water and reed. "Do you come under the truce of the faith, to speak before gods and men and do no violence?" Robb's face did not change. He looked to Catelyn an instant only. "He is my son," she thought, "and I will not let him ask me for permission like a child." She kept her hands folded over the saddle pommel. Robb turned back to the septon. "We do. We demand that the same be kept by the lion, the stag, and the kraken, so sworn." "Each has sworn," the septon said. "By the gods they keep and fear. Lay down blades of war. Keep only the 20 sworn in your guard. Bring no poison nor painted death to the hall, and come." He made the sign of the seven, and the white staffs opened, and the vast, ruined gatehouse swallowed them up. Catelyn heard the murmur of her son's lords, the great Jon muttering about vows and piss, Rickard Karstark's breath like a hiss through his teeth, Roose Bolton quiet, always quiet. Harrenhal's yard was a hive of banners. Lion and crowned stag, stag on green, kraken, direwolf, bristling in the lake wind, each with its glitter of helms and spears beneath. The smell was more than ash here. There was old smoke, horse, the iron tang of water, a kitchen's sour steam, and under it all something that never quite washed away no matter how hard men scraped. Scorch and char, a dragon's forgotten lick. Robb swung down from his horse in the shadow of the Kingspire and looked up at it as a man might look into the maw of a black cave. Gray wind brushed his hand and then took up his station at his heel. The northern lords were already falling into their argument, because Northmen believed that the best salve for dread was sound. Great Jon, soft in no circumstance, wanted to camp closer to the main hall so the wolf would be the first sight the Southrons saw. Roose Bolton, pallid eyes half-lidded, said in his mild voice that it was unwise to flaunt strength at a council called for peace. "Peace," growled the great Jon. "Peace is a sheep's word." Catelyn guided her palfrey towards them. "Peace is a mother's word," she said. "And if you will not do it for the sheep, do it for the mothers you left in the north." The great Jon looked abashed for the half-beat it took to swallow. Roose's mouth might have twitched. Robb raised one hand and the quarrel died like a snuffed candle. "We will camp where the faith has set us," he said. "We will speak where the faith tells us. We will not be the ones to break this truce." "And if they break it?" Karstark muttered. The winter had hollowed him. His grief for his sons walked beside him like a shadow. Robb's face tightened, and Catelyn saw the hard edge that had no place in a boy's face and every place in a king's. "If they break it," he said, "then we will remind them what wolves do." Catelyn could not help the way her eyes cut to Roose Bolton then. His pale gaze slid to her and away again, oily as a drop on water. Inside the broken hall men had hung new tapers, and fresh rushes lay over slabs of stone where old blood had run and hardened. A dais had been raised under a blackened arch, and the 7 altars at the hall's back were scrubbed and dressed in candles. The hall was vast. Even filled with 4 armies, it seemed it could have held 4 more. On the dais, ironwood chairs, high-backed and stern, had been set for the kings. "High chairs for the high," the great Jon said under his breath. though without cheer. They were not first. The Kraken had come early. Ironborn crouched like carrion birds on the benches, leather creaking, axes leaning against knees. The man with the driftwood crown stood at the foot of the dais, his cloak black as a long night, salt-streaked, stiff. His hair was iron gray. The wind and the sea had carved his face down to essentials. A younger woman stood at his shoulder with eyes as bright as wet slate and a smile that had knives in it. The crown on her father's brow was uglier than any crown Caitlin had ever seen, which did not make it less a crown. Balon Greyjoy did not bow. Balon Greyjoy had never bent, unless it was to lash a line in a high wind. Robb met him in the middle of the hall and stopped 3 paces away. The Septon with the plain face stood between, his white staff angled across their path. "King of Winter," Balon Greyjoy said, and the words made a twist of scorn so clean Caitlin almost admired the craft of it. "Your river friends must have forgot their oaths quick, to call you here where my men have walked as they pleased." "We have not forgotten," Robb returned. "Harrenhal is not yours. Nothing is yours unless you can hold it," the woman at his shoulder said. Her smile made cat. Ellen think of Amarisa Umber's hunting cats. Her black hair was wind-tangled, her stance loose and ready. Asha, Caitlin thought, the sister who sailed her own longship. "As the faith has said," the Septon interrupted, harder than he looked. "No quarrel. The kings will take their seats when the other kings arrive." He turned then, as a low roll of talk swept to the far doors. The crowned stag on green and the crowned stag on black entered together as if to make mock of blood and law. The green came first, a river of silk and flowers. Knights in enamel-bright armor with 7-colored cloaks, their helms adorned with wings and vines and antlers and a silver swan. Behind them came men dressed more simply, mail dulled with oil, surcoats worn by salt and sun. Their banner showed the same stag, but the field behind him was coal-dark, and the men looked as if they would rather be anywhere but parading. The Green King rode a glossy courser and smiled as if Harrenhal were a tourney ground. The Black rode a plain brown horse and did not smile at all. Renly Baratheon dismounted with grace, laughing low to something his white-cloaked woman knight said at his ear. Brienne of Tarth flushed under her helm, though the sight of her did not silence the laughter of those with more lances than wits. A slender man in gold and white, hair like summer, walked at Renly's other side, Ser Loras Tyrell, and the sight of him brought a murmur even from Northmen. Mace Tyrell, heavy as a harvest, came behind with a fur mantle too early for the season and a smugness that had its own gravity. They smelled of green fields and spiced wine, and part of Caitlin longed and hated that she longed. Stannis Baratheon dismounted without ceremony. His jaw looked as if a mason had carved it, his eyes as if any joy there had been planed away. He wore a crown that seemed to weigh him down, plain iron with no ornament but its right to be. Davos Seaworth walked at his elbow, bowing politely to no one and everyone, and a red woman came at his back, hair like a slow coal. Her eyes found Caitlin in the press and slid off, as if Caitlin were a wall. "King Robb," Renly called, warm as a hearth. "I would speak. How fair the north?" "As it ever has," Robb said, and did not smile. Renly's lips quirked anyway, as if the answer had been a jest only he understood. Stannis had paused to look at the ironwood chairs and found nothing to like in any of them. "We sit," he said. The lion came last because the lion always believed that last was most. A river of crimson, a whisper of coin. Ser Kevin Lannister rode at their head with his solid competence. Behind him a gilded litter borne by 8 men, curtains drawn aside to admit the light. A boy sat within, crown of sharp points, lips sharper still. Cersei Lannister rode at his right hand on a courser so pale she seemed to float, in green silk that whispered like grass. The dwarf rode a shaggy step horse with easy balance, black hair and beard a neat pelt, eyes that never stopped moving and never seemed to move at all. Varys drifted near in powder and perfume. Peter Baelish came to heel like a sleek hound with an urban smile. "Your Grace," the Septon said to the boy in the litter, "you are late." "We are a king," Joffrey Baratheon said, drawling. "A king comes when he pleases." Tyrion Lannister's hand on the litter frame tightened for an instant, then released. Caitlin remembered how his hand had felt when she had seized him at the crossroads, like the flank of a fox beneath a winter pelt. He was watching them all, and she was not so proud to think he did not watch her as well. They sat. The ironwood chairs groaned, as if remembering all the kings who had broken themselves in them. The Septon stood between and spoke names that all the hall knew, as if shearing away their greater titles would make them equal. Robb of House Stark, called King in the North and of the Trident. Joffrey of House Baratheon, first of his name, called King of the Undulls and the Rhoynar and the First Men. Stannis of House Baratheon, Lord of Dragonstone, claimant to the Iron Throne. Renly of House Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End, called King of the Seven Kingdoms by his banners. Balon of House Greyjoy, called King of the Isles and the North by his own lips and by the cheers of his men. At that, the Ironborn thumped axe to knee and hooped. The Northman bristled, and grey wind rippled to his feet, a rumble in his chest. Caitlyn's breath stopped. Robb's hand fell to the wolf's neck, out of sight of those who did not know him. She saw muscles release, the rumble fade. "You have come," the Septon said. "By truce of the faith, you will speak first to the matter of the realm's unity, then to claims, then to grievances. Those who break truce will be named kinslayer to peace and foe to gods and men." "Is that a law?" Joffrey sneered, all princeling petulance. "We are the law. You are a boy," Stannis said, voice like a rasp. "Sit your arse on that chair and keep your mouth shut, and you will hear law." Cersei hissed softly, as if she had been struck. The Kingsguard, gray, gold, and white, shifted, hands to hilts, then fell still again at a thin, sharp gesture from the dwarf. Tyrion stood, bowing a shade lower to the High Septon than he would have to his sister. "Your Grace," he said to Joffrey, "we must be seen to care for the gods' peace, if only to give the small folk something to gossip that is not our sword work. Let his High Holiness speak." The dwarf looked to the Septon as if making a stage of the dais and making the Septon his actor. The Septon, who did not look like any His High Holiness Caitlyn had ever seen, did not smile. "Who brings first word to this council?" he asked. Robb stood. He did not step forward, he did not need to. The room paid attention as a dog pays attention to a snapped finger. "I will," he said. "There can be no unity, because I will not bend. The North and the Trident are free. Vev. They'll live by our old laws and die by our old gods. I am Robb Stark, son of Eddard who was Lord of Winterfell, and I am king by acclamation of my lords. The Iron Throne holds no sway over me." Karstark planted his hand on the pommel of his sword, as if to punctuate every word. Maester Vyman, behind him, shut his eyes briefly, as if he would have written the sentence differently. Renly smiled. He was a man who could not help but smile. It rose to his lips as easily as breath. "We have always thought the North fair enough," he said, "though a trifle cold for my tastes. You'll need to give up the Trident. They look south as easily as north when the ice comes, and one river is as fond of running to the sea as the next. We would keep them safe. You would keep them well fleeced," Caitlyn thought, but held her tongue. Robb did not. "Riverrun is my mother's. The Trident is ours. Those who swore to my father swore to me. Sworn oaths can be undone." Littlefinger murmured softly to no one at all, which meant to everyone who cared to hear. Caitlyn felt Robb's shoulders harden, saw Tyrion's quick side glance at Baelish, measuring, weighing. Stannis rose. "Sworn oaths," he said, "are not ribbons for a lord's hair. The law is not canvas. I will say it plain and I will not gild it. I am Robert's brother, his elder brother's elder, the next of his blood and of the rightful line. The boy on that chair is no son of Robert. I have proof, for any man who reads and can count." That sent murmurs rippling. Cersei's green smile flattened. Joffrey's face went from bored to blotched. "Liar!" he shouted, half rising. "Dog! Who are you?" "Boy," Stannis said again, and there was a blade in the word. "Sit down. The law speaks." He did not raise his voice. That was the thing. He did not raise his voice, and yet the hall seemed to bow to it. Stannis's jaw worked once. Lord John Arryn died for asking questions, and Eddard Stark died for telling the answers. The book he read from sits with me, your own maester's hand upon it. Black of hair, Baratheon Trueborn. Black, and black, and black. He lifted a leather-wrapped volume. Mauleon writes it. A child can see it. That boy is golden. Pycelle stirred like a beetle roused from sweetness. Blood tells less than men like to believe. He began, swelling with phlegm and self-importance. There are matters of... Sit, Tyrion said, not looking at him. To Catelyn's surprise, Pycelle sat. Tyrion's eyes had turned to Joffrey, and the look he gave the boy was not the look one should give a king. Let us allow words to be words and not daggers for the moment, nephew. Joffrey stared at the dwarf, jaw working, hands clawing at the arms of the ironwood chair. Cersei put her hand upon her son's wrist and pressed. After a long moment, the sort that stretches so thin it might tear and leave a hole in the world. Joffrey's hands flexed and he sank back. Renly had turned his head, just enough for the Red Woman to catch his profile. Melisandre watched him the way a cat watches a bird behind glass. Davos Seaworth's jaw clenched. I hear your proof, Renly said lightly, as if it were a matter for jesters. I hear your book. If you are right, you are king. Very well. If you are king, then by your grace grant to me the Stormlands, to keep them safe in your name and my own, to be your hand if it please you, or your sword if not. Stannis's eyes did not soften. If I am king, I grant Storm's end to the blood of House Baratheon and to those who served her true. I have a daughter. You are my brother. Be my brother. Bend. It would have been a simple thing for a man who did not love himself more than law, Catelyn thought, and winced at her own uncharity. Renly's laugh was soft as silk. I cannot bend, he said. I am already the thing that bends. I am the willow the storm cannot break. I have the reach behind me. Ask Mace if he will bend. Ask his mother if he will let her skin go slack while you tell him it is for the good of all. He smiled towards the benches where the Tyrell household had taken their seats. There was a sharp-visaged woman among them in a simple gown, wrists laden with pearls, hair white as a cobweb in frost. She looked at Stannis as if he were a boiled potato that had sat too long. Let us not pretend this is an altar, the dwarf said, and his voice was different now. Stripped, the iron underneath. Kings, lords, and liars, we all carry our pockets. The riverlands burn. The small folk break beneath our boots. My nephew is or is not a king. Either way, the war will be the same if we do not bind it now. My father has ridden the river roads. He has learned something of patience. I recommend you all try it. Tywin Lannister sat among his bannermen, not on the dais, and made of his stillness a weapon. He had done that all his life and would do it until his flesh tired and his bones forgot his discipline. He did not look at Tyrion. His eyes were on Stannis now, and Catelyn saw calculation the way a hunter sees the hair's breadth. He is counting, she thought, and then, colder, he is counting, and in his sums I am an absence, a subtracting. Balon Greyjoy laughed. The sound came from deep in him and stank of brine. All your books and banners, he said. Green kings and black kings and wolves who want to be kings in snow. The isles are mine. The seas are mine. I will not bend to any of you. I will take while your farmers sleep and your knights polish their bright steel. He lifted his chin. Give me what I want, or you can swim. What do you want? Tyrion asked, mild as milk. Beyond everything. The North's coasts, Balon said before Robb could answer. He liked to speak over other men. The stony shore, Deepwood Motte, the Mander, and no, little lion, not the Mander you love. The isles that are ours by right and right of strong hands. Leave the green men their fields. I want what men do not plant. Robb stood, and grey wind rose with him as a shadow rises. The people in Epwood Motte are as much mine as the people in White Harbor, he said. I will not give you one stone of the north. The woman at Balon's side tilted her head, curiosity brightening her. People? She murmured, too low to be for the hall. Father, the boy counts people as if they were oars. The boy counts well, Balon snapped. He will count skulls if I set him to it. Caitlin could feel the way it would go then. Men rising, shouting that had sound like iron on stone. The breaking of a truce that had been tomorrow's hope and would become another yesterday's mistake. The Septon struck his staff. Wood on stone cracked like a whip. "There will be order," he said, voice not loud and still heard. "The first day is for stating claims. The second day is for evidence. The third day is for proposals. This is the first day." His gaze moved to Tyrion. "You have had your say, though you do not sit a chair, my lord. Sit you now." Tyrion bowed with ironic grace and sat. Caitlyn's eyes darted to the corner where a girl in a potboy's ruffs had slipped out of shadow to place a jug of watered wine. The girl moved with the wary grace of a small wild thing that had learned an inch of care meant a mile of life. Her head was down, but when the dwarf's eyes flicked to her she flinched, and Caitlin had a clap of pain like a door blown open in her chest. Arya, her mind said, foolishly, impossibly. Arya was lost. Arya was gone south and not returned. Arya couldn't be here in this cursed burnt hall. The girl slipped back again into shade and became rushes and rock. After the council's first blaze cooled, the dais became a theater of watching rather than speaking. Men studied other men. Women studied everyone. The Red Woman watched air as if she could see currents in it, heat flows and cold noddings. It made Caitlyn's skin crawl. Brienne of Tarth stood behind Renly like a straight-forged sword and saw nothing but danger. Loras Tyrell saw danger as well and smiled at it as if he had plucked it for a tourney favor. Davos Seaworth watched the doors and the floors and the guards and the servants. Tyrion watched the Septon and the Lion. The Lion watched the wolf and the black stag. Robb watched his mother when the others were not looking, as he always had. When they adjourned, the hall's hum burst like a hive. The kings retreated to their camps in peals of color. Caitlin walked at Robb's side and listened to the quarrels of his lords like a rain behind her. Karstark's flat fury, the Greyjoy's scorn, Bolton's small and poisonous suggestions. "If the truce fails, we should seize the boy," Roose Bolton said mildly, as a man might suggest mutton or fish. An exchange might be arranged. For Sansa, Caitlin thought, stomach plummeting, and hated herself for thinking it. Robb did not answer. He paced beneath the shadow of the Kingspire and did not look up at it. Grey wind pressed at his hip. "I will not break truce," he said finally, "for them all. Not while they keep it. My father taught me better." Bolton's voice changed not at all. "Your father went south and was killed for keeping faith," he said. "He was killed for trusting men without honor." Caitlin snapped before she knew she was going to speak. The quiet after was like stepping onto air and not finding the stair. Bolton inclined his head a fraction, as if she had agreed with him entirely. In another camp, beneath another banner, Renly had wine in his hand and a cluster of attention around him. "He is a hard man," he was saying to laughter. "Harder than dragonbone, harder than old leather. He has never smiled in his life." The babe at Stannis' christening slapped the wet nurse and shouted for battle. His eyes danced as Marjorie laughed a laugh that ached to be believed. She was beautiful in the way roses are beautiful needlessly, with splendor that provokes cruelty in the men who cannot have it. She touched her husband's sleeve and then removed her hand. A small, precise movement that spoke more than many vows. The white-haired woman at her side said nothing. She had cut up enough meat and men in her life to know that some cuts are better made without speaking. Olenna Redwine took Renly's performance in with a bored tilt of her head, and then cut sideways through it with a remark that made Loras flush and smile and made Mace puff and blink. "Lost. His Holiness will not make your case for you," she said when the laughing died, and it died because she wanted it to. "He looks like a poor man because poor men pray more loudly than rich ones. Not because he loves the small folk. If the book is as clear as the Onion thinks it is, your brother is king and you are something else. You'll need to do more than laugh to take the chair from under him." Renly's charm dimmed for an instant, and the sight was instructive. He did not like to have sand thrown on his gloss. Loras moved slightly, a body's length closer, anger a flush under milk. "He will never make a king," the Knight of Flowers said. A king must be loved or feared. He is neither. Stannis is feared, Marjorie said. Just not by those who will help us. She lifted a hand to adjust the fall of her hair. The gesture hid the tilt of her face to meet Olenna's eye. Then make him, Olenna said. A king is made like a pudding, with heat and stirring and a good strong stomach. She leaned over the litter table and took a strawberry, and the way she bit it made men look away. If you can do it by law, the Reach will swallow law and smile. If you cannot, you had better be ready to do it by something else. And I suspect the Red Woman would tell your sour brother what that something is and put a shadow at your back before you had finished your sentence. On Dragonstone's colors, there was no laughter and less wine. Stannis had his book open on the trestle in front of him, and Davos swore under his breath because he would rather have the man's sword open on the trestle, not the book. Melisandre stood at the far end of the tent like a red candle burning and did not blink often. You will not bring the fire to him here, Davos said. He said it quietly, his voice a rope thrown to a man in a storm because it was the last rope left. You swore truce. I swore no truce, Melisandre said softly. The gods do not swear to men. King Stannis did, Davos said, and Stannis's face tightened and loosened as if some old wound had tugged at it and gone away again. King Stannis will not win a throne the way a cat takes a mouse. Not here. Not under the gods' eyes. Other eyes look, Melisandre said. Then let them look elsewhere, Davos said. Let them look at sea. This is a place where men will remember what is done and how. Give them a shape to remember. He looked to Stannis. Your Grace, if there is any scrap of courtesy you can show your brother, show it here. Show it before all. If the Tyrells think they can live with you, they might. Stannis's mouth flattened. He had not been given a face for smiling, but he had been given a brain for counting, and he counted always. If, he said. A torch burned low outside the Lannisters' pavilion. Tyrion stood beside it and watched moths immolate themselves. Because why not? The torch made a sausage of light that wavered when the wind sighed. Cersei came to stand beside him like winter at a new door. You will not sell my son, she said. He did not look at her. I could not get a fair price, he said. Too many in the market. You will not sell him to that sour, bony man in rusty armor. She said it as if it would make the realm better by the sound of it. Father will not allow it. Father will allow what saves his gold and his name, Tyrion said. He dropped a twig into the torch and watched it flame. Sister, you might consider the oddness here. Your son's head sits on a chair for which he was not born by your bed. The book is a book, that is true, but the man holding it has a name, and names sometimes mean more. The Tyrells will come to whichever bed warms them. Balon will come to whichever shore he can scratch his name in. The North is done with us whether we call them done or not. We can bleed for honor or we can bargain for ours. He turned at last. If we give him up, we give him up to our world. Father keeps the West. Tommen keeps his head and his kittens. You keep something. For a year, a month, a day. There are no feasts left in this larder. There are only suppers we can make out of scraps. Cersei's eyes glittered like shards of bottle glass on a road. You are a dwarf, she said, as if that were a refutation. Tyrion bowed. Always and forever. I do hope that if we cut the boy free of the chair, we spare him the throne's end. I keep thinking of that. Little daggers of iron, he added. He had never liked the throne. It had no sense of humor. Father will not give up Joff, she said quieter, and he wondered when she had last called the boy that. He will not give up the throne to that walking finger of disappointment. Then he will keep 2 wars and the pity of half the world, Tyrion said. Both go poorly with supper. He looked at her, plain. I cannot save you all, sister. I can barely save your reputation from your own steps. But I can make a shape in which our house does not end. It will be ugly. It will be you bowing to someone you hate. But then, you have been bowing to someone you hate most of your life. It will just be different. She flinched, as if he had struck her. You mock. I live, he said, and he could not help the softness that crept in. I would have you live too. Joffrey, you cannot control him, and if you could you would not. He is a fire that burns you because you need to touch the flame. He let the quiet then, because he had found that sometimes quiet's shape persuaded more than words could. In the Ironborn's camp, the drums beat slow as a sleeping man's heart, and the smell of salt was everywhere, though the nearest sea was a day's ride and a day's row. Asha Greyjoy had her boots off and her feet on a keg, and was picking her nails with a knife. "We could take deep wood while they pray," she said, as if she were speaking of taking a jug. "Walk our men up through the pines and show them what iron tastes like." "You break truce," Aaron Damphair said, emerging from the shadows like a wet rope. He had water in his hair and a sanctity that tasted like rust. "The drowned god frowns upon men who spit upon oaths before the gods. Even green gods." Asha looked up at her uncle, smile tilting. "The drowned god can keep his frown dry. Men laugh at truce as they laugh at weather. We bring rain." She looked to her father. "He is old. He should not have come so far from the sea." Alon's head turned, slow as a ship's in a dead calm. "I will go as far from the sea as I please," he said. "And farther. Men will speak the name Greyjoy at Harrenhal. That pleases me." He smiled then, but it was a baring of teeth. "I would speak it at Winterfell if I could. Once we take the boys' coasts, we will reach inland. Men in fur think themselves hard. We will show them what cold is." Asha's eyes flicked toward the direwolf banners across the yard, and her knife paused in its work. "The boy is not the dumbest shark in this pond," she said. "If the lion throws the golden cub to the old stag, and the green stag kisses the old stag and becomes a good hound at last, then the lion and the stag will turn their eyes north. That will leave us with meat on our plates and men at our door." She put the knife away. "Let us ask something that lives in the world as it is. Ships, timber, the right to take our tithe on the Mander, yes, the one the lion loves. If the West loves its grain, let them pay to carry it." Alon snorted. "I do not ask. I take." "You asked to sit here," Asha said. "You just did it with a crown on." He slapped the keg with his palm, a sound as flat and hard as a strike. "You talk too much," he said. He loved her and could not it without making it an insult. She loved him and could not answer it except with more talk. On the morning of the second day, a mist had rolled in off the god's eye, low and clean, and the reeds looked like a comb dragged through milk. Men called it good luck or bad, depending upon what they had in their pockets. The Septon struck the floor with his staff and called for evidence. Stannis set his book upon the table again and had Pycelle called to read from it, because it pleased him to make a man he disliked serve law. The Archmaester supplicant of Lannisport's letters read, stumbling at first and then smoothing as the words carried him. "Baratheon, black of hair," he intoned. "Lord Lionel, black of hair. His son Rabar, black. His son Jonathan, black. Baratheon Baseborn, M. Black. B. Black. 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 Black." Pycelle's mouth had twisted, as if the list had been turnips he'd meant to make into pears. He finished and coughed and tried to make the cough an interruption. "We must not be led astray by..." "By what?" Davos asked, surprising himself. He had not meant to speak, but the old man's fibrous unction had crawled into him and needed to be coughed out. "By words? In a book? Whose book? Your book? Or was it written by a man who had no love for law? If there is filth in this, you put it there, or the man you copied from did. My sons learned their letters from Fishtally and Catspaw. Even they can see black and gold." Tyrion was watching Davos now with a kind of sorrowful amusement, as if the smuggler had stumbled into a farce he did not know he was acting in. "Ser Davos," he murmured. "If we all begin speaking like men of the people, the court will have to be moved to the docks." From the benches, a woman's clear voice cut. "And from the docks to the fields if we all begin speaking like women of the people," Olenna said. "But here we are. We shall all speak like lords and make a mess of it." Laughter flickered around her, unwilling and relieved. Cersei rose, the green of her gown catching light and throwing it like shallow water. "This is insult," she said. "It is slander. It is treason said in my son's face." You bring books and smugglers and whoresons to call a king a bastard. For once she speaks sense, Renly said cheerfully. Just not the sense she thinks. He spread his hands, palms up. Would you have it, Stannis? If the hall says you are king, would you have the reach? Will you have flowers in your hair and men who bathe more than they bleed? If you think you will chase Mace Tyrell's wagons from behind with your grim face and your better books, you will be surprised when his mother eats you. Do you want me to bring you my lords? Will you say the words that feed them? I will give you them if you can. Catelyn watched Melisandre then. The Red Woman looked down at her hands and smiled very slightly. She was counting, too. It was just that what she counted had no names Catelyn knew. Speak the words, Olenna said, half to Renly, half to Stannis, and amused at the idea that either would listen to a crone with pearls. Give my fools their garlands. Promise Willis a seat near your elbow and Garland a seat near your heart, if you have one. Stannis looked as if she had called him naked. I will not give what is not law to give, he said. I will not promise what I cannot pay. I will grant what a king grants his good servants. Nothing more, nothing less. Then you will have nothing, Renly said gently, almost fondly. You dour old mast. I would give. I would make the Reach Queen in all but name, and they know it. They know you would weave necklaces of your own guts to keep your friends, Stannis said. They know you would sell them when you grew bored of them. The exchange might have flared, but Tyrion was on his feet again, which was a trick one might admire even while hating its implication. He cut through the wrangling with the practiced hand of a man who had been feeding cousins to each other in the hall since he was small. If my nephew is to be called into question, he said, let us call more than his hair, call his axe. He has put men's heads on pikes, some of which I have had to tidy up after. He has strung singers and stripped knights and done things to girls I would rather not name. He is not a fit king, not because he is golden but because he is cruel. If you will depose him as kings have been deposed before, with reasons and forms they can stomach. Call a great council, the sort your fathers loved, and let it choose another Baratheon if it must have a Baratheon. Cersei made a noise that was raw. Traitor, she said. Monster. Monster, yes, he said. Traitor only to my dinner. He will poison it if we keep him. He turned his head and looked at Tywin as if the entire hall were a stage arranged for those two. Father, he said, and the word had weight. You taught me sums. Count the wars. Count the seasons. Count the small folk. Count the fields. Count how many more years of this we can buy. If the answer is more than one, I will sit down and drink water until I die of thirst and tell myself I enjoyed it. Tywin Lannister did not stand quickly. When he stood, he seemed to bring the table up with him. The realm cannot bleed this way, he said, and his voice was the old iron. It cannot bleed for boys' pride or women's beauty or old books. The West will honor a great council if the East and the South and the North will. The words were like hooves on a stone causeway. You could count them. The North will not, Robb said, and there was no heat in it. It was snow. Because we are not their realm. Call your council and choose your stag. We will be a kingdom apart. Tywin's eyes rested on Robb then and did not slide away. Then we will call your arrangement a treaty rather than homage, he said. My father signed them with Dorne, and the world did not end. The Isles must be leashed. He turned his head, and there was contempt in the angle. I have fought Ironborn my whole life. They make brave dead men. If you will have your thefts by right, Greyjoy, you will find them small. You may fish where we let you and drown where we do not. He looked back at the dais. If the black stag sits the throne, Lion and Rose and all will dine together. If the green insists, we will see how long flowers live under frost. It was as much as anyone had heard Tywin Lannister offer in their lifetime. In the hall's murmur, Catelyn saw the shift happen the way a wind turns in the high branches while the leaves below still hang. The Tyrell men whispered to one another in the way of men who had grown up talking in galleries while ministers talked in the hall below. Mace's mouth worked. Loras's jaw set. Marjorie looked at her grandmother and did not need to hear her to know her answer because the mouth that had fed her future as well. Renly stood very still. He had been loved all his life. He had never had men choose to love someone else while he stood there charming. That knowledge came to him like cold water. He did not flinch. He made himself smile. "It seems," he said, "that our elder brother is to have the chair after all." His tone made it a jest. It was not a jest. Brienne of Tarth made a small sound deep in her throat that was not quite pain. "I would not have you think me ungenerous, Stannis. I will bring you my lords, if you will let them keep their titles and their coin and their pride." Stannis did not know how to smile in response. "They will keep what law allows them," he said. "Not a button more." "Then we shall keep our buttons," Olenna said, and it decided more than one life. The third day dawned bright. The mist burned off the lake like a veil lifted. The council had the shape Tyrion had wanted for it. A shape he had carved with careful insults and flatteries, with other men's pride. The septons struck the floor, and the hall murmured and settled. "By truce and law," he intoned, "the kings will speak of proposals." Robb stood first. He had been restless the night between. Catelyn had heard him knock his knuckles against wood in his pavilion as he paced. He had come to her with 2 different treaties, and she had thrown them both into the brazier without reading, and he had stared and then laughed and then tried again. Now he was stripped of paper and had only his voice and his truth. "We will be 2 kingdoms," he said. "There is no shame in that. We remember the age before Aegon. You who sit his chair remember too, because you sing of dragons as if they were yesterday. Let it be the pact of the God's eye. We will not raid your lands or levy your men. We will trade. We will return your criminals and you ours. We will protect our people from reavers born under crowns and from wolves with no lords. I ask only 2 hostages to prove your faith, 1 from the west, 1 from the reach, and I will send you 2 of mine. We will send back Sansa Stark safe from the court you have made, and you will send us Ser Jaime Lannister, who slew our king and sits our grief on his knee." The hall tightened like a gut pulled too hard. Catelyn went very still. Sansa's name hung in the light. In another corner, the pot girl froze and put 1 knuckle into her mouth, and then was gone. Tywin looked to Tyrion. Tyrion looked to Tywin, and some compact was sealed that did not require a raven. Cersei's mouth opened and closed. She was a fish on a sunny riverbank for an instant and then was queen again. "You will not have Jaime," she said. "He is worth 100 Sansas." "He is worth 1, Robb said quietly, and Catelyn's nails bit her palm. "1 father, 1 lord, 1 king. I would have him for that." Tyrion stood before his sister could make cruelty a knife again. "If the realm is as wise as we are trying to pretend it is, my sister's daughter will be better used in the north than she has been in the capital," he said. "We can exchange a kingslayer for a girl who will grow to womanhood somewhere she is wanted. It is almost poetic." "Father," Tywin's face was a fortress. "Bring me a great council and a king I can name king," he said. "And we will see who is a hostage and who is a guest." It was more consent than most men could have extracted in a month of bargaining. Catelyn's breath shook. Stannis rose as if he had been waiting for the word king, which he had been. "The Great Council will be called in King's Landing when King's Landing has a king," he said. "Until then we will hold it here under gods who can watch. The law says it must be a Baratheon. I am a Baratheon. My daughter is my heir. Neither your boy nor your girl has any place near this chair." "Harsh?" Tyrion murmured, almost admiringly, because a blow that clean was rare. Balon laughed. "You will hold your council in the lake if you like, and I will sail past and spit in it," he said. "The isles are free. I take deep wood and the stony shore. I will not pay, I will not ask, I will not bend." "Then you will drown," said Aaron Damphair with terrible mildness. "Brother, you swore truce. Hear the sea in your blood and let it pull you back. If you will not bend to men, bend to the storm." Asha put her hand on her father's arm and squeezed too hard. Balon frowned at her. "Say what you want," he said to her under the hall. She smiled at him with her mother in her face. "Timber," she said. "Salt. Rights to take our share at White Harbor and at Old Town. Let us be lawful thieves and not the other sort." If you cannot take gold with a sword, take it with a quill. Balon spat. You would make women of us. I would make my men live long enough to die of drink, Asha returned. If the North raids us for stealing their women, we will have to fight the North and the Lannister both. You can be old and die in your bed with salt on your tongue, or you can be cold and die on a boy's sword. Like Roderick. Choose. Balon Greyjoy scowled at the room, at the world, at the sea. He lifted his hand, as if to swat away a fly, and met his daughter's eyes. After a long moment he dropped his hand. Timber, he said grudgingly. Salt. White Harbor and Old Town will pay us as they pay their other thieves. You keep your stones in the North, Wolf. You will pay to float your bread. I will drink your tears anyway. Rob's mouth flickered. I will pay to float bread, he said. I will not pay to float grief. If one woman is taken from her bed, I will send her back with your man's head in her lap. The Great John laughed then, huge, like a bear's cough. The sound broke a tight thread and men exhaled. The season turned a fractional degree. The Septon raised his hand as if to bless, and Catelyn saw it then. The shadow moving at the edge of the dais, where light made the stone seem a crack. It detached and flowed. Brienne of Tarth moved at once, her reflex faster than thought, interposing her broad back and her cloak. She saw nothing, but she felt something. She raised her sword and the air bit at it. Davos Seaworth felt the cold on his gums like a taste of iron. Melisandre lifted her head and smiled as if she had seen a lover. Stannis flinched and did not know why. Nothing, Tyrion said, and his voice was not entirely steady. This hall is full of draft. Ghosts, Olenna said, almost tender. It is good to know Harrenhal keeps its humor. The shadow was gone, or was a thing men's eyes would not keep. Davos glanced at Stannis and caught the moment. The fissure, the doubt. He stepped close under the mutter of men sitting again. No shadows, he whispered. Not here. Not ever again. Stannis did not look at him. No, he said, and that no was heavier than some king's yes. In the afternoon, with the light slanting through the high black windows like lances, the Septon struck the floor a final time. By the gods and by the consent of lords here gathered, he said, the question of the Iron Throne is answered not by steel but by concourse. The Great Council held at Harrenhal recognizes Stannis of House Baratheon, true-born son of Steffan, as king of the Undulls, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, to sit the Iron Throne if the Iron Throne will bear him. The North and the Trident are recognized as a separate kingdom under Robb of House Stark, to be bound by treaty to peace and trade. The Iron Isles are recognized as a realm with ancient rights over the salt and timber trade at White Harbor and Old Town, and bound by oath to take no woman nor child, to raid no tillage and burn no ship that pays. The Reach and the West will bend to the king if the king bends enough to let them. Let it be written. Let it be done, Tywin Lannister said, and that made the world shiver because men had not often heard him say words that frightened him. Let it be done, Mace Tyrell said more loudly, because he was slow to know he was frightened and quicker to pretend. Loras's mouth tightened. He had cut his oath into himself like an old scar. Renly stood and bow-waggled at his brother, gracious as a court harper, and Catelyn felt a tenderness for him she did not want. I will come to King's Landing, he said. If you try to throw me from a window, I will wear a better cloak. I will throw you, Stannis said, but I will do it by law. It would have been funny if it had been anyone else. Cersei rose with her son in tow. Joffrey's face was blotched again and reddening. We will not accept this, he was saying, high and breaking. We will not. He jerked his arm from Cersei's grip and seized for his sword. The Kingsguard moved. The hall moved. For a breath, Truce held its breath to see if it would live. Tyrion stepped before his nephew and put a hand upon the boy's wrist, and if the hand had been any other man's, it would have been cut off. Joffrey, he said, and his voice was tired and fond and flint all at once. You are going to be the most famous boy in the world. You are going to be the boy who had the chance to be a king and chose to be a man. Joffrey stared at him as if he had spoken a new language. Cersei's face crumpled and hardened, a banner in a confused wind. Tywin Lannister looked at his grandson and saw the ruin of a name in the slant of a lower lip. He nodded once. "If my grandson takes off his crown and keeps his head, I will call it a bargain," he said. "If he keeps his crown and loses his head, I will call it justice, but not mine." Men looked away then, because there are indecencies even in war. The boy's hand eased. He was 15 but had never been 5. He let the sword fall back into its sheath. He lifted the crown off his hair with both hands, and it caught the light as if reluctant to go. "We will not forget," he said. But he said it as if he were telling a story he had been taught and did not believe. He set the crown on the arm of the chair and sat down. The hall did not cheer. It did not dare. After, in the small hours when councils make their last and ugliest bargains, Catelyn walked with Robb along the lakeshore. The reeds brushed her skirts. The god's eye lay smooth as hammered silver. Far off and low lay the Isle of Faces, a smudge of darker dark. Men said the weirwoods there were older than law. Men said many things. The croak of frogs was a music of its own. "You will send 2 to them?" she asked. "Hostages. Guests," Robb said. "Because a boy must tell himself a story that lets him breathe. Wyman Manderly will send a son. He says he is sick of the winter and would like a summer. I will send Varen Karstark as well, because I do not dare send the wrong one." Catelyn stopped and looked at him. "You are young," she said, and outside of halls and ears she was allowed to say it. "You do not have to be hard all the time." He looked out across the lake. "I am tired," he said. "I am not sure I know the difference." She touched his arm. "There will be time enough to learn," she said, and lied because she had to. When she turned, the pot girl was there again, no emo. Wreath and a bit of shadow with eyes. Catelyn's breath hitched. She reached out a hand, slow as a woman coaxing a wild foal. The girl flinched. "Arya?" she whispered, because the night allowed the madness of it. The girl's mouth, fierce and thin, opened. For a moment her eyes were all Stark, all wolf. Then she shook her head hard, jerked away, and was gone into the reeds. Catelyn stood with her hand out to no one. In the dawn, men began to write the pact. Maesters sharpened quills and shook sand over letters that would go stale the moment ink dried. Seals were heated and impresses pressed. The lion's head, the stag's crown, the kraken's tines, the wolf's head with winter in its teeth. Stannis pressed his with rigid care. Renly made a flourish. Balon stamped salt smell into his wax. Tywin signed with neat exactitude. Tyrion signed nothing and made everything happen. Olenna dabbed at her eyes and said she always cried at weddings and wars. In a corner, Davos pried Melisandre's gaze off the hall with the simple weapon he had used on captains and lords all his life. He asked her a question. "What do you see?" he said. She looked at him as if he had asked why fish swam. "I see a camp," she said. "I see men bargaining for a world they did not make with coin they do not own. I see a wind rising across the water." "North?" he asked. "Everywhere," she said. On the third night, when torches flickered and porridge was more ash than grain because the cooks had grown lazy, Catelyn stood waiting in the yard with gray wind and felt the thunder inside her like coming down a steep stair and missing a step. Footsteps came. The smell came before the sight. Roses and sweat and the copper tang of a sword cleaned in haste. The Kingslayer came in irons, flanked by Northmen and a Lannister close as a tick. He looked thinner. He still looked like a man who had never doubted anything until the day he did, and that day had shackled him. They brought him forward and the hall went quiet like a harp with a dozen hands on it. The exchange happened under torches and under eyes and without flourish. Catelyn felt no satisfaction when she watched the shackles swapped from one set of wrists to another, because satisfaction is a cousin of revenge, and she had no time to do the visiting she wished to do. Sansa came forward, white-faced and steadied by a hand that Catelyn loved against her will, Tyrion's. He had walked her from the lion's tent himself. He had not let Cersei do it. "Lady Stark," he said, and his tone was not mock. Sansa looked like a winter rose that had been blown upon for 2 years. She saw her mother and did not run to her. She moved with terrible control, slow and sure, as if she believed she might break if she tried to be swift. and that if she broke she would make a sound someone could use. Caitlin put her hands on her daughter's shoulders, shook with the force she did not put into it, and then folded the girl to her, and for a moment there were no kings in the world and no packs, only a woman smelling the hair of the child she had nearly lost. Behind her, Arya watched from the shadows with her teeth in her lip and said nothing at all. When they marched away from Harrenhal, they left like tides. The Lannisters rolled west with carts that had grown fatter on other men's coin. The Tyrells flowed south with their pageantry. Sunlight caught in enamel, laughter turning into planning as it went. Stannis' retinue took the river road like a spear thrown at a heart it was not sure it could find. The Ironborn trekked north and east, their drums like dead men's hearts, banners stiff. The Northmen turned their faces home and breathed as if breathing could be a meal. The pact, stitched in letters and in looks, went before them. Men argued with it, spat on it, kissed the wax, hid it under shields, carried it in saddlebags and in their heads. At a ford a week east, a company of men in gray cloaks took a girl from a wagon, and the Wolf King's riders found them by noon. And by evening a head floated in the ford like rotten fruit, and the girl slept in a tent where no one spoke to her except to ask what she liked to eat. At Old Town, a master of coin with fingers like an abacus took the new rates from the Ironborn and cursed because they were fair. At White Harbor, Wyman Manderley's son sang a song about summer and ate fish stewed in cream with a Lannister boy who liked cats and had never killed anyone, and they both tried not to say aloud the names of men they had lost. In King's Landing, when the Great Council was held again under a roof that sweated heat, men spoke the words they had spoken at Harrenhal and then changed some of them because that is what men do. Stannis sat a chair he had never wanted and looked like a man trying on a shirt cut for another. The corners pinched. Tyrion stood behind him and looked like a man astonished to find himself standing behind anyone with comfort. Renly stood to Stannis' right and smiled at suitors and felt the leash Kinslaying's rumor had woven around his throat and decided he would make a silk bow of it before it was done. Cersei stood alone as a woman in a tower of men can be, and counted her knights by the teeth she ground in them. Joffrey rode out to a summer house with a dozen men and found that, without a crown, he was still a boy who did not understand why the world did not like him. North, at the edge of a wood where children had climbed and fallen all their lives, Robb Stark stood with gray wind and watched the first snow that mattered come down, light as breath. He closed his eyes and let it melt on his lashes. Sansa sang when she thought no one could hear her, and men cried when they thought no one could see them, and women began to plan weddings again, because if you cannot make the world as safe as your cradle, you can at least braid a girl's hair and choose a dress that will make her mother weep. Some nights, in her dreams, Caitlin saw Harrenhal again. She saw the melted towers and the reeds and the shadow that was and was not, and she saw her daughters running at her from across a snowfield, and one reached her and one never did. She would wake with salt on her lips and could not tell if it was from tears or the lake. She would lie there and tell herself a truth. A pact is a shelter you put up against weather you cannot stop. Maybe spring will come before the roof leaks. On Dragonstone, Melisandre stood at the sea's edge and tasted ash on the wind that had not yet found its way to men's tongues. The fire on her palm burned a steady height and did not flicker, though the wind had risen. "You have made a shape," she said to Davos, where he stood with his hands like old rope. "It may hold." "It may," he said. He did not say the rest. He did not say, "And it may not, because the night is patient and men are not." He did not say, "And there are other winters coming that no pact can warm." The Isle of Faces lay where it had always lain. Its trees whispered to one another as they had whispered when men left their first marks on wet clay. No oars cut the water around it. No eyes saw the men who did not live and did not die, who watched from within its bark. They watched as wolves and lions and stags and roses and krakens moved about the lake like toys on a child's board. They watched as men with books and men with blades made kings out of words. They watched as, for a season, the reed beds were left undisturbed, and small frogs lived their small lives without being crushed under marching feet. When the ravens came, and they would, or they would not, or they would bring snow in their wings, there would be time enough to build another shelter. For now there was this. A boy with a crown who had put it down, and a man with a claim who had picked it up with steady hands, and a girl who had been lost and had slipped by her mother like a shadow. For now there was this, a pact signed in a burnt hall by men who could not keep their promises except that sometimes they could. Caitlin walked with Sansa at her side on a morning when the frost drew ferns on leather, and Sansa's voice was soft. "Mother," the girl whispered, as if the word itself were the tent under which they stood. "Do you think he will be kind?" "Men are men," Caitlin said. "Some learn to be. Your father did. Your brother will." She did not say, "Some never do." She did not say, "We make a world out of the ones we can." In a narrow alley of King's Landing, Arya Stark, who kept other names in her mouth as a hedge against loneliness, leaned against a wall and breathed in smoke and fennel and piss and thought of Harrenhal and the way her mother had smelled, and then she pushed it down into the place where she kept water and bread and knife. The words of the pact ran through the city like a thin broth and filled no one completely, but it warmed. She slid along the wall, quick as any rat, and the city turned around her and did not see. She smiled with half her mouth. Tywin Lannister sat at a desk and wrote letters that would carry a year's worth of his will in them. In one, he wrote to a man in the west who had 3 sons and was thinking of sending one east. In another, he wrote to a man in the Riverlands with a pale wife and an old grudge. In a third, he wrote to his daughter and said nothing at all. He sealed them and set them aside. He was very tired and did not let himself know it. Renly dreamed a dream of a throne that would soften to his hand, and when he woke he told himself that he could learn to love a hard seat if it allowed him to seat the men he loved around it. He went to Stannis' council with a jest in his mouth and a plan in his head, and Stannis ignored one and asked for the other. The rhythm would hold for a while, perhaps long enough. Stannis looked at a map until the ink blurred. He thought of Davos's boys and of a red-faced baby who had been laid upon his arm and woken him to something that had been love, and he had not known it at the time. He thought of his father and a hawk's high call over Storm's End, and of a day he had eaten a lemon cake and had not known he would not eat another for 20 years. He rubbed his eyes and went back to his sums. Somewhere far off, the sea beat a patient drum. Balon Greyjoy stood on the strand at Pike and watched men drag timber from ships with long hooks and swore at them because that was love, too. Asha laughed at him and set men with ledgers to count the cargoes and did not let them cheat more than she would have in their place. Aaron preached at men who listened when they were not drunk and roared when they were. Victarion watched the horizon for sails that would give him a reason to burn something, and when they did not come, he polished his helm until he could see the shape of his face in it and did not like the man he saw. The Great John told the tale of Harrenhal that winter by a dozen fires. He told it loud and he told it wrong and he told it wonderfully, and in his telling Shadowdancers leapt from a red woman's eyes, and the lion had wept and the kraken had stolen the Septon's shoes. The children laughed and the men argued and the women smiled and shook their heads. The truth lay where it always lies, in a place that cannot be carried to market and set upon a scale. Snow fell. Ash fell, a bit in men's conversations, a bit in their cups. In the burned-out ribs of towers on the god's eye, rooks nested and bickered and courted, and their nestlings grew fat. In the spring, when the pact was no longer new and the ink had flaked off one corner of one copy and the seal on another had cracked because someone had kept it near a fire, a man came to Winterfell from the wall with news that smelled of ice. He was led in and given bread and salt and a blanket for his bones. He spoke in the hall and men listened, and some smiled because they did not believe, and some did not smile because they did. It scarcely mattered then. It would matter later. There's a moment in any bargain that feels like peace. At Harrenhal, on a day that tasted of reed and smoke and old grief, that moment passed through men's hands like water and left them looking at one another, faces strange and familiar, and wondering what they had taken hold of and what they had let go. They would find out. They always did. For now, they stacked their promises like wood by the door and hoped it would burn long enough to keep the night at bay.